My name is Rachel. And 6 months ago, my husband Ethan died in a train accident. One minute he was heading in for another early shift with the rail company. And the next, I was standing in the hallway of our apartment, phone in hand, frozen in place, as a stranger's voice told me the train had derailed. There were casualties. Ethan didn't make it. He was only 35. He was supposed to come home for dinner that night. He always did. I work as a receptionist at a mid-sized hotel just outside the city. It's not glamorous, but it helped us pay the bills. Ethan and I weren't wealthy, but we were careful. We saved what we could. We planned for the future like it was something promised. When we finally closed on our small 2-bedroom apartment, we felt like we had made it. It wasn't big. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. Fully paid off. Every square foot bought with years of sacrifice. Skipped vacations. And secondhand furniture. That apartment was where we brought our daughter Emma home after she was born. Where we stayed up together through her colic nights. Where we painted her room a soft yellow after she outgrew her crib. It's where we taught her how to tie her shoes and ride a bike. It's where I watched Ethan fall asleep on the couch. Emma curled against him. Both of them breathing in sync. After he died, people told me to take things one day at a time. But when your life shatters in an instant, time stops, meaning anything. The first few weeks were just silence. The kind that hums in your bones. Emma stopped speaking altogether. She'd stare out the window for hours like she was waiting for him to walk up the stairs. At night, she'd cry until she couldn't anymore. And I'd sit outside her room, listening, feeling completely useless. I didn't even have energy left to cry with her. I just sat. Still. The life insurance payout covered the funeral and gave us a short cushion, but I had to go back to work almost immediately. Bills didn't stop. Groceries didn't stop. Emma needed school supplies. She needed food. She needed me to function. That apartment became everything. It wasn't just a place. It was a lifeline. The only thing that made me feel like Ethan was still taking care of us. Even from the other side of the grave. I used to walk into the kitchen and still smell his coffee. I used to reach for his coat out of habit when the weather turned cold. And then one afternoon, when I was just beginning to find a way to breathe without breaking, my parents showed up at my door. Not with soup or flowers or questions about how we were holding up, but with something else entirely. I never thought my own family would be the ones to try to take away what little we had left. I never thought the real threat wouldn't be the grief, or the loneliness, or the bills piling up, but them, the people who were supposed to protect me, who were supposed to love Emma like their own. I wish I could say I saw it coming, but the truth is, you never expect betrayal to come from the people who raised you. You never expect your loss to be the opening they use to reach in and take what's left. You never expect the real storm to arrive after the funeral. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in April. Emma was in her room working on a science project. And I was folding laundry in the living room. One of those small, mindless tasks that gave me the illusion of control. When the doorbell rang, I wasn't expecting anyone. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door. Standing there, without a heads up or a trace of warmth, were my parents and my younger sister Zoe. Rachel. "Honey, you look tired," my mother said, brushing past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. My father followed with a grunt that I suppose was meant to pass for a greeting. Zoe smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We were just in the area," my dad said, as he settled himself into Ethan's old recliner like he owned the place. "Thought we'd check in." Something in me tightened. I hadn't seen or heard much from them since the funeral. Unless you count the occasional surface-level text. Not once had they offered to help with Emma. Not once had they asked if I had enough food in the fridge. And yet here they were. Unannounced. Sitting in my home like they'd never left. "We've been really worried about you," Zoe added. her hands resting casually over her stomach. I hadn't even realized she was pregnant until that moment. She wasn't showing much, but the way she positioned herself said it loud and clear. She was expecting, and that was supposed to mean something. I stayed standing. "We heard from your cousin that the apartment's fully paid off now," my mother said, eyes darting around the room like she was assessing what was worth keeping. "It must be such a relief." "It is," I said. "It's the only thing that's keeping us grounded right now." My father leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees. "Well, that's actually why we're here." I knew before he said it, something in his tone, in the way Zoe avoided my eyes, in the way my mom's voice went high-pitched like she was about to sell me a timeshare. "Zoe and Jason need more space," he said flatly. "They're having twins." My mother beamed, her hand on Zoe's shoulder. "Isn't that exciting? 2 little blessings." I looked at Zoe, waiting for her to say this was all a misunderstanding, that she didn't come here to ask for something so unthinkable, but she just smiled nervously and looked down. "Rachel," my father said, "this apartment is too much for just you and Emma. It makes more sense for a growing family to have it. You could easily rent something smaller, maybe closer to us." He blinked. "You're asking me to give them this apartment?" "We're not asking," he said. "We're suggesting what's fair." The words landed like a slap. I could barely form a response. I wanted to scream, to ask how they could possibly think this was okay, that this home wasn't just bricks and paint, it was Ethan's. It was Emma's. It was all we had left of the life we built. Instead, I stood. "No. This is our home. I'm not giving it up." There was a long pause. Then my father's expression shifted, darkened. He looked at me the way he used to when I was 12 and dared to question him. "You'll regret this," he said. His voice was low, even, and final, and in that moment, I understood exactly what he meant. This wasn't a request. This was a threat wrapped in family pleasantries, and it wasn't the first time I'd been cast as the difficult one, but it would be the last time I stayed quiet about it. The next morning, it began. It started with a text from my mother, just a short message, filled with faux concern and unmistakable guilt. "Zoo's heartbroken. Rachel. She's trying to stay calm for the babies. But this stress isn't good for her. Can't you find it in yourself to help your sister?" Just this once I didn't reply. I couldn't. Not because I didn't have words, but because I knew exactly what was coming next. My mother didn't make requests. She made campaigns, and I was the target. Within days, the messages multiplied. Aunts I hadn't spoken to in years sent long-winded paragraphs about family, about duty, about sacrifice. My cousin Jenna, who had once borrowed my car for a full semester and never returned it with gas, sent a voice note that ended with, "We're all really disappointed in you. It would have been laughable if it hadn't felt so orchestrated." Then came the calls at work. At first, I didn't know who was behind them. But after my 3rd shift that week, where my manager pulled me aside to ask if I was doing okay, I put it together. Someone had told them I was unstable, grieving too hard, maybe not fit to be around guests, maybe not fit to be around Emma. I confronted my supervisor, a kind but cautious woman named Diane. She admitted a man had called and mentioned concerns about my emotional state. He hadn't given a name. He didn't have to. I knew that voice better than I knew my own. My father wasn't just trying to take my apartment. He was trying to paint me as unfit, professionally, emotionally. As a mother, I went home that night shaking. Not from fear, but from rage. My hands trembled as I checked the locks on our door. Twice. Then 3 times. Emma was sitting on the couch, wrapped in the old blanket Ethan used to fall asleep under. Her eyes flicked to me and then away. "You okay?" "Kiddo?" I asked, trying to sound calm. She hesitated. Then Grandpa called me. I froze. What, at school? She said. At recess. He talked to the front office and asked to speak with me. He said, we might have to move. That you're being unfair. My stomach dropped. I knelt in front of her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. You're not going anywhere. Do you hear me? This is your home. She nodded. But I could see the doubt already creeping in. My daughter, 10 years old, being pulled into a war she never asked to fight. That night, after she went to bed, I updated every emergency contact form I could find. I removed my parents. I added my neighbor Sarah and my best friend from work, Amanda. Anyone but them. I wanted to believe that would be enough. That setting boundaries would stop them. But people like my father don't stop when you say no. They escalate. They spin stories. They turn your silence into an admission of guilt. They surround you with a chorus of voices, each one a little louder, a little more desperata, until you start to question the truth you've lived yourself. But I wasn't going to question it. I couldn't afford to. Because this fight was no longer about a property line or square footage. This was about Emma. Her safety. Her sense of peace. The only real thing Ethan left behind. And I was done giving any of it away. It was a Wednesday. Late spring. But the air still held that strange chill that made evenings feel colder than they should. I was halfway through my shift when my manager pulled me aside. Rachel. I hate to ask, but we're short tonight. One of the front desk girls had a family emergency. Any chance you can stay and cover the evening? I hesitated. Emma was supposed to go home with her friend Lily after school. But Lily's mom had texted earlier that Lily was sick. My backup plan. Sarah next door. Could only watch Emma until 6. I checked my phone again. That's when I saw it. A message from my mother. We heard you're stuck for tonight. We can take Emma. It's just one evening. Let her spend time with family. I stood in that hallway for a full minute, staring at the screen. Every part of me screamed not to trust it, but I needed the hours. And I was out of options. Maybe, just maybe, this was their version of an olive branch. So I texted back, just for tonight. Please have her in bed by 9. She has school tomorrow. The reply was immediate. Of course. We know how to take care of our granddaughter. By the time I got off, it was almost 10. I called my parents' house. But no one answered. I called their cell phones. Nothing. Panic crawled up the back of my throat. I grabbed my coat and keys and left without clocking out. I drove straight home. When I arrived, the apartment was dark. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Heart pounding. Emma, I called out. No answer. Then I heard it. A soft hiccup. Like someone trying not to cry. I rushed to her room. She was curled up on her bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Her face was wet with tears. Her eyes red and puffy. At first I didn't see the bruises, but when she turned toward me, I did. Red marks around her neck, fingertip-shaped. A patch of hair missing above her left ear. A small scratch down her cheek. I dropped to my knees beside her. Emma. Baby. What happened? She looked up at me. Her voice barely a whisper. Grandpa got mad. He said I was being disrespectful. Just like you. Then he grabbed me. He pushed me. He pulled my hair. I felt the world tilt. And Grandma said I was being dramatic. Zoe was there. But she didn't say anything. I couldn't breathe. Emma reached for her backpack. Her hands were shaking. I recorded it. She said, like you taught me. In case something ever happened. She pulled out her tablet and placed it in my hands. I looked at her. My daughter. 10 years old. Having the clarity in a terrifying moment to do what even grown adults sometimes forget. I wrapped my arms around her. holding her as tightly as I could without hurting her. Her little body trembled in my arms. And I knew. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was an assault. And it wasn't just against Emma. It was against everything Ethan and I had tried to build. I took pictures of her bruises. I saved the recording. And then I picked up the phone and called the police. That night, everything changed. Whatever illusion of family I had left shattered completely. Because love doesn't leave bruises on a child. And I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The officer arrived within 20 minutes. His name was Keith. A calm man with kind eyes who took one look at Emma's neck and quietly asked if we had somewhere safe to stay that night. I told him we'd figure it out. At that point, I wasn't thinking about anything beyond keeping my daughter close and conscious. At the hospital, a nurse with gentle hands and a no-nonsense voice moved us into a private room immediately. Emma sat on the edge of the exam table, her legs dangling, clutching her stuffed rabbit like it was the only stable thing in her world. The doctor, a woman named Reynolds, was soft-spoken but firm. She explained everything to Emma before she touched her, asking for permission like it was sacred. As she worked, she spoke clinically into her recorder contusions around the neck, consistent with forceful gripping. Localized hair loss indicating yanking. Linear scratch across left cheek from possible ring abrasion. H word felt like a nail being driven in. Not into Emma, but into the false image my father had built over decades. When Officer Keith returned, I handed him the tablet. "There's an audio recording," I said. "Emma made it during the assault." He didn't play it there. He bagged it as evidence. Thanked Emma for being brave. And said the tech team would extract the file to preserve the chain of custody. He promised we'd be kept informed. That night, we stayed with my neighbor Sarah, who didn't ask questions when I showed up at her door with a pale child and a hospital wristband. She made tea, put out extra blankets, and texted her boss to say she'd be late the next day. The next morning, my attorney Michael Dawson called. He had already spoken with the district attorney's office. "The evidence is solid. Rachel," he said, "we're moving forward with criminal charges. And I've filed for an emergency protective order for both you and Emma." I exhaled for the first time in what felt like days. Later that afternoon, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't open it, but something about the timing made me curious. It was from Thomas, Zoe's husband. "I don't know if you'll believe this, but I need you to know something. This was never Zoe's idea. Your dad pushed it. He said the apartment was wasted on you, and that Emma would adapt if you moved. Zoe didn't fight him, but she didn't start it either." I stared at the screen. The message wasn't a full confession. It didn't excuse silence, but it cracked something open. People always think abuse is loud, that it comes with broken dishes and screaming matches, but more often, it's quiet, it's persuasive. It disguises itself as family meetings, logical suggestions, reasonable expectations, and in that quiet, people like my father get away with so much, until someone records it. 2 days later, I was called in to listen to Emma's recording. Detective Morales played it in a small room. No distractions. Just a speaker and a notebook in front of me. It was worse than I imagined. My father's voice was unmistakable. Controlling. Calm. Cruel. "If your mother had just given us the apartment, none of this would be happening," he said. "She's poisoning you against your own family." Emma's small voice quivered. "I just want to go home." Then the sound of impact. A gasp. The slap of flesh and a cry of pain. Her breathing sped up. Then the sound of a door slamming shut. I couldn't listen all the way through, but it was enough. More than enough. That recording didn't just capture what he did. It captured why he did it. And now, for the first time in my life, I had more than just my voice. I had proof, and I was going to use it. The weeks leading up to the hearing felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the wind to shift. Every day, Emma asked if Grandpa would go to jail. And every time, I gave the same answer. We don't know yet. But the truth is on our side. Zoe didn't reach out. Not at first. Not after the arrest. Not when the news broke. Not when the recording aired on local news with the faces of our parents blurred but their voices unmistakable. But then, out of nowhere, her husband Thomas called again. She's ready to talk, he said. She's scared, but she's ready. Zoe met with the district attorney's office quietly. Behind closed doors, she gave them a sworn statement. She confirmed the plan wasn't spontaneous. That our father had spoken for weeks about how to correct my behavior, that he believed the apartment should belong to her because I couldn't appreciate what family meant. She told them he had framed it as discipline, as teaching Emma a lesson, just as he had done to us. For years. She didn't just describe what happened that night. She opened a window into our childhood, into his punishments, his shaming, the way he pitted us against each other. How her role as the golden child came with conditions. Obedience. Silence. Loyalty above all. She cried through most of her statement. I was told. But she didn't stop. The prosecutor said it changed everything. Her testimony, combined with the recording and Emma's medical reports, built a case stronger than anyone had hoped for. Still, nothing prepared me for watching my daughter take the stand. She wore a simple blue dress and a headband to cover the patches where her hair was still growing back. Her hands trembled when she sat down. But when the judge asked if she was ready, she nodded. They gave her a written version of her statement in case she couldn't get through it. But she didn't need it. She looked the judge in the eye and said, "The scariest part wasn't the pain. It was knowing someone who's supposed to love me was hurting me, just to punish my mom." The room was silent. Not a single cough or shuffle. Just that one sentence, hanging in the air. I watched the judge close her eyes for a moment like she needed to steady herself. When the verdict came, it felt almost too simple. Charles was sentenced to 5 years in state prison for felony child abuse, assault, and attempted coercion. My mother received probation. The court cited her failure to intervene and her attempt to minimize the assault afterward. She was given a permanent no-contact order and required to attend mandatory counseling. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. But that peace came with a cost. The apartment, once a symbol of everything Ethan and I had built, now felt like something else. I'd lie awake at night in our bedroom and hear Emma shift in hers. I'd find her wandering the hallway at 2 a.m, silent and afraid, unable to say what was bothering her. The living room still smelled like Ethan's cologne sometimes, but now, it also echoed with the memory of voices raised, of threats made, of innocence bruised. One night, as we sat on the couch together, Emma leaned against me and whispered, "I don't want to live here anymore." I nodded. I understood. We had won the fight. We were safe. But the healing, that would have to happen somewhere else. Selling the apartment felt like closing a book I never wanted to finish. But it wasn't surrender. It was a decision, a conscious choice to leave behind a space that had become too heavy with grief, betrayal, and memories that no longer brought comfort. The day I signed the listing papers, Emma stood beside me in the kitchen, her fingers tracing the edge of the countertop. "We don't have to take everything," she said. "Just the stuff that still feels like Dad." She was 11 now. But the way she carried herself lately made her seem older, like she had grown 3 years and 3 months. The real estate market had improved, and the apartment sold quickly, more than we paid for it. Enough to give us a fresh start. And then, in a twist of timing I can only call grace, I received a certified letter from a law firm in Oregon. It was about Ethan's grandmother. A woman I barely knew. She had passed away quietly months earlier and, with no other direct heirs, had left her modest estate to Ethan. Now that inheritance passed to Emma and me, it wasn't life-changing. But it was enough. Enough to reduce my hours at the hotel. Enough to let me be home after school. Enough to slow down and breathe. We found a small 2-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and a good elementary school. The house had a front porch swing and a backyard just big enough for Emma to plant the strawberry seeds she got from her science class. She picked out paint colors for her new room. A pale green that reminded her of spring. I chose beige for the walls and white trim. Something neutral and soft. Peaceful. We didn't take everything from the old apartment. We left behind the couch, the rug in the living room, the heavy dresser Ethan and I had once argued over in a furniture store. We only brought what felt light, what felt ours. One night, after Emma had gone to bed, I sat in our new kitchen with a cup of tea and opened my laptop. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to say. I only knew I needed to say something. I started writing. Not for sympathy. Not for attention. Just honesty. Truth. I wrote about what it feels like when the people who should protect you become the ones you fear. I wrote about how trauma isn't always loud. About how breaking away from your family doesn't make you a villain. It makes you brave. I called the blog Breaking Cycles. In the days that followed, messages began to trickle in. First a few, then dozens, then more than I could keep up with. Strangers telling me they'd lived through something similar. That they thought they were alone. That they didn't have words for what they'd felt. Until now, I started adding resources to the site. Contact info for therapists. Legal aid links. A section for children. Written in words. Emma helped me choose. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. About holding a mirror up to the kind of generational pain that often hides behind forced smiles and Sunday dinners. We weren't running from anything anymore. We were building something better. Something new. And this time, no one else got to define it but us. 2 years later, the house smells like cinnamon and lavender. Emma's in the living room, practicing a speech for a youth workshop she's helping to lead next week. She's 12 now. Taller. More confident. With a quiet strength in the way she moves. Her hair has grown back fully, and the headbands she once used to cover bare patches are now just part of her style. Colorful. Playful. Completely hers. The blog has become something more than I ever expected. Breaking Cycles turned into a nonprofit last spring. We now have a small team. Part-time counselors. A legal advisor. A graphic designer who used to be one of our readers. We host support groups online and in person. Offer guides for navigating restraining orders. And provide mentorship for kids and parents trying to escape toxic households without losing themselves in the process. Emma insisted on creating the children's section of the website. She said, "Grown-ups always write like they're talking to other grown-ups. Kids need someone who remembers how it feels to be scared and small." She was right. She usually is. Last month, she was invited to speak at a community fundraiser. She stood on stage, microphone in one hand, the other clutching her note cards. She wore a purple dress Ethan gave her for her last birthday, and a bracelet she made herself with the word brave spelled out in tiny silver letters. When it was time for her to speak, she didn't read from the cards. She looked directly into the camera and asked, "Would you stand up to your family to protect someone you love, even if it meant losing people you thought were supposed to care about you, even if it meant starting over?" There was a long pause after she spoke. The room was silent, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that comes when people are really listening. I stepped up beside her and said, "We made hard choices. We walked away from people we were told we had to keep. We said no when yes would have been easier. But they were the right choices. And we learned something important. There's good life waiting on the other side of breaking the cycle." Afterward, someone asked if I ever wanted revenge. If I ever wished I could go back and say something different. Do something louder, harsher, final. And I thought about it. But no. Revenge never came from hurting them back. It came from healing. From growing. From refusing to stay silent. It came from watching Emma sleep at night without flinching in her dreams. From opening our door to other survivors and seeing them slowly become more than what they escaped. From knowing I didn't just survive, I rebuilt. One evening, as we sat on our porch swing watching the sky fade from pink to gold, Emma turned to me and asked, "Do you think Dad would be proud of us?" I didn't even hesitate. "Yes," I said. Not just proud. Amazed. She smiled and rested her head on my shoulder. "I think he'd like the name Breaking Cycles." Me too. Because that's exactly what we did. We didn't just break away. We broke through. And we're never going back.